The galaxy was full of dangerous creatures. Every species knew this. Every child learned about the monsters that lived among the stars. But when anyone talked about the most dangerous, the most feared, the most terrifying beings in all of known space, they always mentioned the first. They came from a world called a prime. It was a death world. The plants there could kill you. The water could dissolve your bones. The air was filled with poison spores that would eat you from the inside out. Everything on a prime was designed to kill, and they had become the ultimate killers to survive. They stood 8 feet tall when fully grown. Their bodies were covered in scales harder than steel. They had 4 eyes that could see in total darkness. Their claws could cut through metal like a hot knife through butter. Their teeth were long and sharp, designed for tearing flesh. They were fast, they were strong, and they were absolutely without mercy. When the first made contact with the rest of the galaxy 300 years ago, there had been panic. Many species wanted to destroy them before they could become a threat. Others wanted to run and hide. In the end, the Galactic Council had decided to invite them to join as equals, hoping that diplomacy would be safer than war. It had worked mostly. They kept to themselves. They traded with other species. They sent ambassadors to important stations. They followed the rules of galactic society. But nobody ever forgot what they were. Nobody ever felt safe around them. They were predators and everyone else was potential prey. Relay Station Omega-7 floated in space like a giant spinning wheel. It was one of the biggest trading posts in the outer territories, home to over 100,000 beings from 200 different species. Ships came and went at all hours, carrying goods and passengers from across the galaxy. It was a busy place, a crowded place, a place where anything could happen. The human section of the station was small. Humans were newcomers to the galaxy. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 60 years ago, which made them bobbies compared to species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. There were maybe 300 humans on Omega-7, mostly workers and traders trying to make a living in this strange new universe. Danny was one of these humans. He was 28 years old, average height, with brown skin and short, dark hair. He had a friendly face, the kind that made people want to talk to him. He had come to Omega-7 3 years ago looking for work and had found a job as a cargo specialist. It was not exciting work. He mostly moved boxes from one place to another, but it paid well, and Danny liked the quiet routine of it. Danny lived in a small room in the human residential area. He shared it with his friend Lisa, a technician who worked on the station's life support systems. They had known each other since they both arrived on the station, and they had become close friends over the years. Lisa was smart and practical, while Danny was kind and perhaps a little too trusting. They balanced each other out. On the day that changed everything, Danny was eating his lunch in his favorite spot. It was a small alcove near the cargo bay, tucked away from the noise and bustle of the main corridors. He liked to sit there on his breaks, enjoying the quiet and the solitude. He had a sandwich from the human food dispenser and a bottle of water, and he was perfectly content. That was when he heard the sound. It was small and high-pitched, somewhere between a squeak and a hiss. It came from the ventilation shaft above his head. Danny stopped eating and listened. The sound came again, followed by a scratching noise like tiny claws on metal. Danny was curious by nature. He could not ignore a sound like that. Something was in the vent, and it sounded distressed. He stood up on his crate and peered into the darkness of the shaft. At first he saw nothing. The shaft was dark and narrow, not designed for anyone to actually enter. But then his eyes adjusted and he spotted them. 2 small creatures were huddled together about 10 feet inside the shaft. They were reptilian, covered in soft scales that shimmered slightly. They had 4 eyes each, all of them fixed on Danny with fear and defiance. They were tiny, no bigger than kittens, and they were shivering from the cold. Danny felt his heart melt immediately. He did not know what species they were. At that moment, he did not care. All he saw were 2 bobbies, lost and scared and alone. Every instinct he had told him to help. "Hey there, little ones," he said softly. "It's okay, I'm not going to hurt you." The creatures hissed at him. The larger one raised its tiny claws in a threatening gesture. It would have been scary if it was not so adorable. Danny smiled. You're trying to be brave, aren't you? That's good, but you don't need to be scared of me. I'm a friend. He reached slowly into the shaft, moving as carefully as he could. The creatures backed away, pressing against each other. The smaller one made that squeaking sound again, and Danny's heart broke a little. I know, he said gently. Strange place, strange creature reaching for you. It's scary, but I promise I just want to help. You look cold. Let me get you somewhere warm. The creatures did not come any closer. They just stared at him with those golden eyes, frightened and uncertain. Danny could see the conflict in them. They were exhausted and probably hungry. They wanted help, but they were afraid. Danny decided to try something different. He pulled his arm back and sat down on his crate. Then he started to hum. It was an old trick his grandmother had taught him. She had grown up on a farm and had spent her whole life around animals. She always said that scared creatures needed calm sounds. Loud noises and sudden movements made them more afraid. But gentle humming, a soft and steady vibration, told them that everything was okay. Danny hummed an old lullaby his grandmother used to sing. He did not remember all the words, but the melody had stayed with him his whole life. It was slow and sweet, meant for children who could not sleep. For a long moment, nothing happened. The creatures stayed where they were, watching him carefully. But then, very slowly, the larger one began to creep forward. Its movements were hesitant, ready to run at the first sign of danger. But it kept coming, drawn by Danny's gentle humming. The smaller one followed close behind, using its sibling as a shield. But it was coming too, and Danny felt hope rise in his chest. He kept humming, kept his body still, kept his eyes soft and friendly. The creatures reached the edge of the shaft and paused, sniffing the air. Danny could smell them now, a faint scent like copper and something warm. It was not unpleasant at all. The larger creature made a decision. It jumped. It landed on Danny's shoulder, and he felt a sharp pain as tiny claws dug into his skin. The creature was heavier than it looked, maybe 5 or 6 pounds, and its claws were surprisingly sharp. But Danny did not flinch. He did not move. He just kept humming, kept being calm, kept being safe. The smaller creature jumped too. It landed on Danny's other shoulder, and now he had 2 small aliens hanging off him. They were still trembling, still scared. But they were no longer hiding. They had chosen to trust him. Good job, Danny murmured between hums. You're so brave, both of you. I've got you now, you're safe. He slowly raised his hands and cupped them around the creatures, supporting their weight. They tensed at his touch but did not bite or scratch. They just pressed closer to him, seeking his warmth. Danny realized how cold they were. Their scales were cool to the touch, much cooler than they should have been. These creatures clearly came from somewhere warm, and the ventilation shafts of a space station were anything but warm. Let's get you somewhere cozy, he said softly. Somewhere you can warm up. He cradled the creatures against his chest and started walking toward his quarters. They did not fight him. They just burrowed deeper into his shirt, making soft sounds that might have been contentment. Danny smiled down at them and kept humming as he walked. The trip back to his room took about 15 minutes. Danny moved slowly and carefully, not wanting to startle his small passengers. He also did not want to draw attention. He had no idea what species these bobbies were, and he did not want to cause a panic. When he reached his quarters, Lisa was there. She was sitting at the small desk they shared, working on something on her tablet. She looked up when Danny came in, and her eyes went wide. Danny, what is that on your chest? Bobbies, Danny said simply. I found them in the vents. They were cold and scared. Lisa stood up and came closer, her expression changing from surprise to alarm. Danny, those look like cubs. Do you know what it is? Danny shook his head. Should I? Lisa stared at him like he had lost his mind. They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They're giant reptilian predators, 8 feet tall, claws that can cut through steel. They eat other species for breakfast. Danny looked down at the small creatures nestled against his chest. They had stopped shivering and were now making a low purring sound. Their eyes were half closed with contentment. These little guys don't seem dangerous to me, he said. Danny, the adults could kill you in about 2 seconds. And if the parents find out a human has their cubs, they might do exactly that. Danny frowned. He had not thought about the parents. Of course there were parents. These bobbies had to have come from somewhere, and if what Lisa said was true, those parents were probably very worried right now. "We need to find them," he said. "The parents, I mean, we need to let them know their bobbies are safe." Lisa nodded quickly. "Yes, good idea. I'll contact station security and see if anyone has reported missing cubs." She hurried back to her tablet and started typing. Danny carried the cubs over to his bed and sat down carefully. They did not want to let go of him, so he ended up lying back with them still pressed against his chest. They seemed to like that even more. The purring got louder, and their small bodies relaxed completely. One of them, the smaller one, wrapped its tail around Danny's finger and held on tight. The other one found a comfortable spot right over Danny's heart and settled there with a contented sigh. Danny felt something warm bloom in his chest. They were so small, so vulnerable. He could feel their tiny heartbeats against his own, fast and fluttering. They trusted him completely. Despite being a stranger, despite being a different species, they had chosen to trust him. "I'll keep you safe," he whispered to them. "I promise, no matter what." Lisa spent about 20 minutes on the communication channel with station security. Danny could hear her voice in the background, but he was not really listening. He was focused on the two small lives resting against him, feeling their warmth and their trust. He started humming again, that same lullaby from his grandmother. The cubs seemed to love it. Their purring synchronized with his humming, creating a strange but pleasant harmony. Before long, their breathing deepened and their bodies went completely limp. They had fallen asleep. Danny looked at them with wonder. These were supposed to be apex predators. These were supposed to be the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. And here they were, sleeping on a human's chest like they had found the safest place in the universe. Lisa finished her call and came over to the bed. She looked down at Danny and the sleeping cubs, and something in her face softened despite her worry. "Security says there are 2 diplomats on the station," she said quietly. "A mated pair. They reported their cubs missing about 2 hours ago. The whole station has been searching for them." "Someone needs to tell them we found them," Danny said. "Security is handling it. They're sending someone to bring the parents here." Lisa paused and bit her lip. Danny, the security officer, sounded scared. He said the parents are extremely upset, like terrifyingly upset. Danny nodded slowly. He understood that. If his children were missing, he would be terrified and furious too. He would tear the whole station apart looking for them. "It'll be okay," he said. "Once they see their bobbies are safe, they'll calm down." Lisa did not look convinced, but she sat down in a chair nearby and waited. The wait was not long. About 40 minutes later, heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Then there was a sound at the door, not a polite knock or a chime, but a heavy thud that made the whole wall shake. Danny's heart beat faster, but he did not move. The cubs were still sleeping, and he would not wake them. Whatever was about to happen, he would face it lying down. Lisa went to the door and opened it. Danny heard her sharp intake of breath. "They're inside," Lisa said, her voice carefully controlled. "They're sleeping, please be quiet." Heavy footsteps entered the room. Danny turned his head and got his first look at an adult. The creature was enormous. It had to duck and turn sideways to fit through the doorway. Its head nearly scraped the ceiling even when it hunched over. Its body was covered in dark green scales that looked like armor plates. Its claws were as long as Danny's fingers and looked sharp enough to cut through anything. Its 4 eyes were fixed on Danny with an intensity that made his blood run cold. A second followed the first. This one was slightly smaller but equally terrifying. Its scales were darker, almost black, and its eyes burned with what looked like rage. Danny swallowed hard. These were apex predators. These were creatures that could kill him without even trying. And they were looking at him like he was the most important thing in the universe. He forced himself to stay calm. He forced himself to keep breathing slowly. The cubs were still sleeping on his chest, peaceful and unaware, and Danny refused to let his fear disturb them. "They're right here," he said softly. "Safe and sound. They just fell asleep a little while ago." The smaller, the one Danny guessed was the mother, moved closer. Her scales were changing colors in ways Danny did not understand, shifting from red to gray to purple. Her claws were fully extended, and her body was coiled tight like she was ready to pounce. "Step away from them," she hissed. Danny shook his head gently. "I can't do that. If I move, I'll wake them up, and they need their sleep. They had a hard day." The mother's eyes widened. For a moment, Danny was sure she was going to attack him. Her claws twitched, her muscles tensed, and a low growl rumbled deep in her chest. But then she stopped. She looked at her cubs, really looked at them. They were peaceful. Their scales were a deep blue color, a color Danny had never seen on them before. Their small bodies rose and fell with Danny's breathing. They were completely relaxed. They were completely content. The mother made a sound that Danny's translator could not process. It was somewhere between a gasp and a whimper, a sound of pure, overwhelming emotion. "How?" the father asked. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. "How is this possible? Our cubs do not trust strangers. They attack anyone who comes near them. They should have torn you apart." Danny glanced at the scratches on his arms. "They tried at first, but they calmed down once I started humming." "Humming? What is humming?" "It's a sound humans make. My grandmother taught me that it helps scared creatures relax. You make a soft noise with your mouth, kind of like this." Danny demonstrated with a few bars of the lullaby. "It worked on the cubs. They stopped being scared and let me carry them." The parents looked at each other. Something passed between them, some silent communication that Danny could not understand. Then the mother's scales shifted again, settling on that purple color. "What is your name, human?" she asked. "Danny, Danny." "Danny," she said his name slowly, carefully. This is my mate. The cubs you are holding are our children. The larger one is, the smaller one is." Danny smiled down at the sleeping bobbies. "And those are beautiful names. They're beautiful cubs, too." "You think so?" There was genuine surprise in A's voice. "I do. They're really brave. When I found them, they tried so hard to protect each other. But they were just scared, you know? Lost and cold and scared. All they needed was a little warmth and someone to tell them everything was going to be okay." A moved closer. Danny tensed slightly, but she did not seem aggressive anymore. Her claws had retracted, and her body language had changed from threatening to something else. Something like wonder. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the cubs. "Of course, they're your children." A reached out with one large clawed hand and gently touched her daughter's head. Stirred at the contact, but did not wake. She just made a small sound and pressed closer to Danny's chest. "She knows my touch," A said softly. "She knows I am here, but she does not want to leave you." Danny did not know what to say. He just lay still and let the moment happen. Had not moved from near the door. He was watching everything with his 4 eyes, his expression impossible to read. But when he spoke, his voice was different, softer, almost gentle. "Among our people, there is a sacred bond called. It is a life debt that can never be repaid. It is given to those who protect our children." Danny shook his head. "You don't owe me anything. I just did what anyone would do." "No," his voice was firm. "You did not do what anyone would do. Most beings would have called security and walked away. Some would have ignored them completely. A few might have harmed them out of fear. You are the only one who would have done what you did." "But I didn't do anything special. I just kept them warm and sang to them." "Exactly." Moved forward, his footsteps surprisingly quiet for such a large creature. "You treated them as precious. You treated them as worth protecting. You treated them as children who deserved care. This is not common in the galaxy, Danny. This is rare." Lisa, who had been watching from the corner, spoke up. "It's not that rare for humans. Danny has always been like this. Give him any baby animal and he goes all soft. It's kind of his whole personality." A turned to look at her. "Is this true? This behavior is normal for your species?" Danny shrugged, which was hard to do with cubs on his chest. "Humans like bobbies, all bobbies. We think they're cute and we want to protect them. It doesn't matter what species they are. When we see something small and helpless, we get this feeling that makes us want to take care of it." The two looked at each other again. Then A did something that made Danny hold his breath. She knelt. It was not a casual movement. It was formal and deliberate, clearly holding deep meaning. She lowered herself until her eyes were level with Danny's, and she pressed one clawed hand against her chest. "Danny," she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "You have protected my children when you had no reason to do so. You have shown them kindness when you could have shown them fear. You have treated them as precious when most would have seen them as threats. For this, I offer you the life bond. It means that you are now family. It means that any who harms you will answer to us. It means that our home is your home, our protection is your protection. This is the greatest honor our people can give." Danny felt tears sting his eyes. He did not fully understand what was happening, but he knew it was important. He knew it was something that would change his life. "I don't know what to say," he admitted. "Say that you accept," said. "Say that you will be family." Danny looked at the two sleeping cubs on his chest. Had one tiny claw hooked into his shirt. His tail was still wrapped around his finger. They looked so peaceful, so safe. "I accept," Danny said softly. "I would be honored to be family." A made that untranslatable sound again, and this time Danny knew it meant joy. She reached out and touched his face with surprising gentleness, her claws carefully hidden. "Thank you, Danny. Thank you for being what you are." She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. Did the same a moment later. Danny found himself surrounded by these two massive predators, held close like he was something precious. He was not afraid. He did not think he would ever be afraid of them again. They stayed like that for a long moment, then began to wake up. She lifted her small head and blinked her 4 golden eyes. For a moment she looked confused, unsure of where she was. But then she saw her mother's face, and she made a sound of pure joy. The reunion that followed was something Danny would remember forever. Scrambled from his chest to her mother's arms, chirping and squeaking with excitement. Woke moments later and did the same with his father. The cubs were passed back and forth between their parents, examined for injuries, covered with nuzzles and sounds of love. But they kept looking back at Danny. Every few seconds, one of them would turn those golden eyes toward him, making sure he was still there. "They do not want to lose sight of you," said, wonder in his voice. "They have never acted this way with anyone outside our family before." "Kids usually like me," Danny said with a small smile. "I don't know why." "I do," I said firmly. "It is because you have a good heart. Even our children can sense it. Even they know that you are safe." Eventually, gathered the cubs in her arms and faced Danny. He had sat up now, and he felt very small next to these massive beings. "You will come to dinner with us tonight," I said. It was not a question. "You and your friend, we wish to thank you properly." Danny looked at Lisa, who seemed to still be processing everything. She gave a small nod. "We would be honored," Danny said. A's scales shifted to a warm golden color. "Good. Family shares meals together. We will see you this evening, Danny. Until then." She turned and left, close behind her. The cubs watched Danny over their parents' shoulders until the door closed. The room felt very quiet after they were gone. Lisa sat down heavily. "Danny, what just happened?" Danny lay back on his bed and looked at the ceiling. He could still feel the warmth where the cubs had been sleeping. He could still hear the echo of their purring. "I think I just got adopted by the scariest family in the galaxy," he said. Lisa laughed. It sounded slightly hysterical. "Of course you did. Of course that happened. Because you're Danny, and the universe apparently decided you needed giant killer lizards as relatives." Danny smiled. "They're not scary once you get to know them. They could literally eat you." "They won't. We're family now." Lisa shook her head, but she was smiling too. "You're completely insane. You know that, right?" "Maybe, but I'm also really happy right now." He turned to look at her. "Aren't you even a little curious about food?" Lisa thought about it. "I mean, I've heard they eat raw meat." "See, it'll be an adventure." "An adventure where we might accidentally offend giant predators and get killed." "An adventure," Danny repeated. Lisa sighed. "Fine, but if we die, I'm blaming you forever." The dinner that night was unlike anything Danny had experienced before. The quarters were huge, built to fit their size. The ceiling was high, the furniture was massive, and the lighting was dim. It was warmer than the rest of the station, and Danny understood why the cubs had been so cold in the vents. And greeted them at the door with what Danny was starting to recognize as warmth. The cubs were there too, and they immediately ran to Danny with excited sounds. Climbed up his leg before he could react, followed right behind. Within seconds, Danny had two small aliens hanging off him, chirping with joy. He laughed and scooped them up. "Did you miss me? I was only gone a few hours." They chirped at him enthusiastically. "They have been asking about you all afternoon," said. There was something like amusement in his voice. They would not stop wondering when Danny would come back. The dinner was elaborate. There were meats that Danny did not recognize, some raw and some cooked. There were glowing fruits and strange vegetables. There were drinks that smelled sweet and tasted like nothing Danny had ever tried, and ate the raw meat with obvious enjoyment. Danny and Lisa stuck to the cooked food and tried not to stare. But the food was not the important part. The conversation was. Wanted to know everything about humans. He asked about Earth, about human history, about how humans lived and thought and felt. He was especially interested in empathy, the human ability to feel what others felt. "Among our people, emotions are private," he explained. "We do not share them easily. We do not try to understand what others feel unless they tell us, but humans feel for others without asking. You see pain and want to help even when it is not your problem. This is strange to us." Danny considered the question. "It's just how we are, I think. When we see someone hurting, we hurt too. It's uncomfortable to watch others suffer, so we try to make things better. Even for strangers, even for beings who might be your enemies. Sometimes, yes, not always. Humans can be cruel too, but at our best we help anyone who needs it, because that's what we would want someone to do for us." A tilted her head. "This explains your stories. We have read some human stories. So many of them are about heroes who sacrifice themselves for others, who fight impossible odds for people they barely know, who choose death rather than abandon someone in need." Danny nodded. "Those stories remind us who we want to be. We don't always live up to them, but we try." Who had been sitting in Danny's lap throughout the meal, reached up and touched his face with one small claw. It was gentle and curious. Danny smiled at her. "She loves you very much," said softly. "Cubs do not form attachments easily. They are taught from birth to be suspicious of strangers, but she looks at you like she looks at us, like you are safe, like you are home." Danny felt his throat tighten. "I feel the same way about her, about both of them. When I found them in that vent, something just clicked, like I was supposed to be there, like I was meant to find them." "Perhaps you were," said. "Perhaps the universe knew our cubs would need someone that day. Someone who would not see monsters, but children. Someone who would show them that the galaxy is not only full of danger, but also full of kindness." The dinner lasted several hours. By the end, Danny felt like he had known the family for years. They were fierce and proud and sometimes frightening. But they were also loving parents, devoted to each other, and surprisingly warm once you got past the scales and claws. When it was time to leave, the cubs did not want to let Danny go. They clung to him, chirping protests as their parents tried to gently pull them away. "You will come back?" asked. Danny smiled. "Try and stop me." She pressed her forehead to his. "Good. Family does not abandon family. Remember that, Danny. You are one of us now. Wherever you go, whatever you do, you will always have a home with the..." Danny walked back to his quarters that night with Lisa beside him. The station corridors were quiet, the lights dimmed for the night cycle. He could not stop smiling. "So," Lisa said, "how does it feel to be adopted by aliens?" Danny thought about it. He thought about and their golden eyes. He thought about and their fierce love. He thought about the word family and how it suddenly meant more than it ever had. "It feels right," he said. "It feels like exactly where I'm supposed to be." Lisa shook her head. "This is going to change everything, you know. You can't be family with the scariest species in the galaxy and expect life to stay normal." Danny laughed. "When has my life ever been normal?" They walked in comfortable silence. Then Danny spoke again, softer now. "You know what I keep thinking about? Those two cubs lost in the dark, scared and alone. And all it took was a little warmth and a song to make them feel safe. That's all anyone really needs, isn't it? Someone to tell them it's going to be okay, someone to hold them when they're scared, someone to remind them they're not alone. Lisa looked at him with something like wonder. You really believe that? I do. I think kindness is the most powerful thing in the universe. Stronger than weapons, stronger than fear, stronger than anything. Because kindness connects us. It reminds us that we're all just beings trying to survive, trying to be happy, trying to find our way. Lisa did not answer right away. She just looked at him, this ordinary human who had done something extraordinary. Then she took his hand. You're really something, Danny. Danny squeezed her hand and smiled. I'm just human, that's all any of us can be. The story spread across the station within days. Everyone on Omega 7 heard about the human cargo worker who had found two cubs and earned the sacred life bond from their parents. The tale grew with each telling. By the time it reached the Galactic Council, it had become legendary. They had always been feared. They had always been seen as predators and threats. But now there was a new story. A story about a human who saw past the scales and claws and teeth. A story about kindness bridging the gap between species. A story about family found in unexpected places. Diplomats started talking. Treaties started forming. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy began to see thee as something other than monsters. Danny did not think of himself as a hero. He was just a cargo worker who liked bobbies. But the universe had other plans. He visited Anne regularly after that first night. He watched and grow from tiny cubs into strong young. He learned their language and their customs. They learned about Earth and humans and the power of empathy. Grew up to be a warrior, but she was known for her mercy. She had learned from Danny that strength was not just about defeating enemies, but about protecting the innocent. Became a diplomat, using his father's wisdom and Danny's compassion to build bridges between species. They never forgot the human who had found them in the dark. Even when they were grown, even when they had their own cubs, they still came to Danny when they needed comfort. They still pressed their massive bodies against his small human frame and listened to his heartbeat. Some bonds transcend species, some kindness echoes forever. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy, not the fastest or most advanced, but they had something many species lacked. They had heart, and heart could change everything. Years later, historians would trace the great shift in relations back to one moment. A moment in a cargo bay when an ordinary human heard a frightened sound and chose to help. A moment when kindness met fear and kindness won. Danny never cared about being famous or legendary. He just wanted to grow up safe and loved. He just wanted to be there when people needed him. That was what being human meant to him. Being there, showing up, reaching out. And letting lost children know they were not alone. The galaxy was vast and cold, but it was also full of warmth for those who knew where to look, full of connections waiting to be made, full of families waiting to be found. Danny understood this. He had always understood it. And somewhere among the stars, on a station spinning slowly in the darkness, he hummed an old lullaby and waited for his family to come home. They always did. Because family, once found, was never truly lost. Not among humans, not anywhere in the galaxy where kindness still lived. This was the truth Danny had taught them all. This was his gift to the universe. This was what it meant to be human. And the story continued, passed down through generations, reminding everyone who heard it that even the smallest act of compassion could change everything. A man, a song, two lost children, and a love that stretched across the stars. End of story.